Recently, I updated one of my older designs. I used to make this seahorse as a flat-backed piece, but I wanted to make it as a fully three-dimensional model of the seahorse. And so I thought I would take you through the process of what I did because this was a trickier kind of mold to make. So this beauty is the basis for this pendant. I do have two, but I've only used the one on the left to make jewelry. I bought these when I was a kid at a little shop called the Quarter Deck in Situate, Massachusetts, which no longer exists. And then I molded both sides of them, and I have used these molds to make earrings and single-sided pendants. Now what I want to do is fill both sides of the molds with silver clay and join them in the middle so that I have a full replica of this exoskeleton with all of its incredible details. This is a bit of a tricky operation because one, it's not symmetrical down that center line because of how it dried, and two, because of that intricate tail curl. I want you to see this diamond on the forehead. I just think that's incredibly beautiful. And of course there's detail on every part of it, and so that's what makes this a little tricky to mold because I can't encapsulate the whole thing and then cut it open because I don't want to hurt the specimen. And also because there is so much detail along the edge, I don't think it's going to work to make a two-part mold where I have the little bumps, the ins and the outs that help it line up, because I want it to be so tight around the edges. That's why these molds seem like the best method to me. I was able to make them tightly around 1/2 of the original and then trim them down to be a precise half. So I'm going to first press in my lump of clay, and then I can remove the obvious excess. And then what follows here is a process of scraping away and pressing and making sure that I have the mold really full. However, I also don't want to overfill this because if I make this side too tall and the other side too tall, it's going to meet awkwardly in the middle. It's going to be too thick, and I'm going to have to improv where they come together. So now I think I have it down to the right amount of clay, and I'm going to continue to make sure it doesn't go out of the bounds of the mold, just nudging it in. And then for the tail, I'm going to take my clay shaper and just really jam the clay in. And I'm doing this because this area is already so thin, I need it to be as strong and compact as possible in order to not break when I pull it from the mold. And also from experience, I know that unless I do this, the clay might not fully fill the tail portion of this mold. So now I'm going to do the same thing to this one. And I'll go a little faster through here because it is the same. And once these are both packed in and have as clean of edges as I can make them at this point, I'm going to put them on my clay dryer, which is a little device also known as a candle warmer or a mug warmer that will expedite the drying process. This time though, I do not want to dry them as much as I usually do. I only want them to be maybe 40–50% dry. So you can see I've popped a clock on there so you can see this in real time. At the 12-second mark, I'm going to touch the clay to check if it's warm yet. The heat does have to pass up through the silicone, and it has not yet. I'm going to check it again at about the 40-second mark. In that time, this fairly thin piece of clay has dried enough that I feel confident that I can pull this out of the mold and it will stay together. And the reason I have left this so undried is because, as you remember, the seahorse is not symmetrical down that center line, down the center meridian. So I'm going to join these together, but I'm going to push them into each other in such a way that they're going to replicate the bit of warping that happened to the original. And I have to do that in order for the edges to come together properly. And so I know I'm going to have to do a little bit of adjusting that wouldn't be possible if it was totally dry. This is me trying to get the right angle so that I can pop that out with my fingernail without doing damage to it. Something I like to do with this design is raise the snout a little bit more. to bring it into a more lifelike posture than the one it dried in. That does create a little tear in the clay, which I go back into later and fill with paste. And I'm being very careful when I pull these out because, again, partially dry means incredibly fragile, and it'd be really easy for the top to come out and the tail to stay in there, and I'm not going to go through the trouble of joining those together. This just needs to come out in one go. And there it is. Then I will cut out any filler clay like this that's outside the scope of the design so that tail can be the standalone curl that I want it to be. This is also a do as I say and not as I am doing moment because I don't want to cut my work surface, so I'm doing really gentle cuts here, so this isn't very efficient. If you have this kind of Teflon coated work surface, which I love, don't cut right on it. And here you can see they stack onto each other so nicely. That feels very fortunate. And now I'm going to do final prep for adhering them together. You can see there's some rebound in the clay, so even though I did this before, it needs to be done again a couple times as it dries here. I'll start this part of the process by making it wet on the back, and that will start to make a little paste consistency right on the surface, and then I will add paste. And I don't want to introduce too much water, so I'm just going to take some from the one on the left and put it onto the right, and then I'll let it sit for about a minute. And I'm just wetting my paste a little bit because I'm working with some sort of dried up paste, and then I'm going to distribute it. And then I am going to go in and correct this gap in the neck on the one on the right. I don't want the head to fall off when I go through this attaching process. And because I'm trying to be so careful here and not squeeze this because it's not dry, of course I'm going to drop it. Buttered side down. It's okay though. And then immediately over to where it needs to go. And then without any delay, I'm going to align all of the sides. And now I can continue fidgeting with it, but at this point I'm moving both parts in tandem, so that feels good, getting close to where everything needs to be. I'm going to go in and clean up using whatever tool works in a space. I have a needle tool, a tiny brush. This is a silicone shaper. And I'm also using the shaper, which is a little more targeted than my fingers, to press the two sides together. I don't want to press too hard because I'm still a little worried about mushing these really minute details, but I do need these two halves to be connected. And then in the front, you can see here that it didn't reproduce the diamond, which I'm going to go in and do by hand because I want that there. And that's not a surprise that it didn't come through because the mold splits that area in half. So now I'm going to go through with my paste and my tools, and I'm going to bridge the gap between either side and make it seem as one piece. Here's another silicone shaper I'm going to use to clear out the paste in the center of the tail. And you can see here, every time I raise the snout, I have this little tear that's happening, so I'm going to go in with tiny amounts of paste and patch it up. This is what the final piece looks like. I put in a bail up here in the place where it most didn't disturb the details along the head. And I did reproduce the diamond by hand, lining paste in that shape. I'm really happy with this, and I love that it's double-sided. And I hope that this feels like it respects and honors this little seahorse. And this is what this necklace looks like when it's all finished and ready to wear.